And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 85th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, April 23rd, 2019, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. You can catch our live broadcast Tuesday evenings at 8:30 p.m. on our YouTube page or our website. If you miss us for the live broadcast, you can subscribe to our show for free on whatever platforms you listen to podcasts so you can listen on your own time. Check out our Twitter and Facebook at the Hoosier Sound and at Indiana HQ, respectively. Subscribe and turn that bell on. All the information is in our website, indianahq.com. All right, Hoosier Nation, it is time for some sports talk. On the docket for tonight, recruiting has definitely heated up the past couple of weeks. Whether it was Joey Brunk committing to Indiana or other Indiana targets signing elsewhere, this current recruiting period has brought a lot of relevant news to Indiana fans as we look to finish building the roster for next season, hopefully a roster that will bring Indiana back to NCAA tournament glory. After that, we may briefly talk about Indiana players and the NFL and NBA draft, but here with me tonight to break all of this down, of course, the Sam Hauser to my Joey Hauser of the recruiting podcast hosting, Matthew Lukens. How are you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm doing great. It's been a rough last couple weeks as school's wrapping up. This is dead week right now, and we got finals next week. So just send out a prayer for me for the next couple weeks because I'm going to be busy as heck.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Same. I have concerts. I have all three of my concerts in the next week. I have 180 kids doing one big concert at the same time this Thursday. So I totally feel it.
That sounds like fun.
Oh, yeah. Did you like my recruiting duo reference?
I did like that, actually, but I wish that Archie would have them on campus as well as the real recruiting duo, but no.
Yeah, exactly. Since it's a recruiting podcast, a recruiting duo. But Nathan couldn't be with us here tonight because he was invited to go to the Cubs game, and honestly, when would you ever turn that down? So, hope he's having fun there. But last week, he and Blake helped us out last week since both of us were not here. So honestly, we owe him a favor. And speaking of, Blake Betzner, an Indiana HQ writer, hopped on with Nathan last week to cover the Joey Brunk commitment and the Cream and Crimson football game. They did an awesome job. So if you haven't heard that podcast with their analysis from last week, it's very much well worth it, especially to hear the football breakdown from Blake, who knows the program in and out. Follow Indiana HQ if anything, if you like football, just to look at his analysis because he does such a great job with it. But all right, let's get into the actual meat of the episode, recruiting. Just as a reminder, Indiana currently has two scholarship spots open.
Correct.
Officially, there's only one scholarship open as of Tuesday evening, April 23rd. But with the assumption that Romeo stays in the draft, there are two. This also assumes that Devontae Green will come back as well. But two Indiana targets committed to other schools basically in the past 8 days or so. Harlan Beverly committed to Miami about a week ago, and then literally 2 hours earlier prior to recording this podcast, Anthony Harris committed to UNC. Mm-hmm. Before we dive into the players that are basically still on the radar for Indiana, Matt, we haven't heard your thoughts on basically any recruiting news in the recent weeks. So any thoughts on Joey Brunk or people like Harlan and Anthony committing to other schools?
I think Harlan's committing to Miami makes sense. He goes to school in Florida. Larinaga is a great coach. They have some spots and some time open at the guard spot since last year. They didn't have many good guards down in Miami, which is not typical of a Larinaga team. So I think he saw that as an opportunity. He went down there. Good luck to him. I'm going to enjoy probably watching him in a Hurricanes uniform, even though he's not in a Hoosiers uniform. Oh, my phone just fell. Secondly, today, obviously the news was that Anthony Harris committed to UNC. I was not too surprised since he's coming off of his UNC visit. And when he announced he was committing so soon, that made a lot more sense. If IU had blown him away, I feel like he would have committed to IU directly after the visit. So, while that sucks and I'm kind of sad to see him go, I guess that puts all of our eggs in one basket. And that is the Lester Quinones basket. So we're going to look for Lester Q to commit, hopefully, again in these upcoming weeks. Of course, he's got to visit this weekend here at Indiana, so hopefully that goes better than expected, and we can get another guard in here. But yeah, as far as Joey Brunk, look, we haven't had much 6 foot since I have been here at school. The tallest person we have had in an IU uniform was 6'10". So Joey Brunk is now the tallest person that I have seen in an IU uniform in about 4 to 5 years, and height is always welcome in a Big Ten where you have Michigan State and Purdue who love to have 7-footers who can do just about everything. So I will take one, Joey Brunk, please. Thank you. Also, he's very efficient offensively. So as a 6th man coming off the bench for a Deron Davis who is injury prone and probably not, up to shape as he should be, any height and length is acceptable on that line. So, yeah, I mean, Joey Brunk's a great addition. He's an Indiana kid. I feel like I'm just repeating what everybody else has said so far, but yeah, just run down. I'm happy that he's a Hoosier, and it's interesting that he's a grad transfer with 2 years to play. I think that's key because you're replacing somebody like a Clifton Moore, who would have been a junior next year, right? And played maybe 3 minutes a game, with a guy who played about 18 minutes a game at a Big East level, which is like one of the Big 6 conferences in college basketball, is more dynamic offensively than Deron Davis is, and we know how good Deron Davis is offensively, and he can step out and shoot a little bit. I think this is a no-brainer, and it makes our squad better. It doesn't make us a tournament team by any means necessary, but I think it's a wonderful addition, and I can't wait to see him in an Indiana University uniform. There we go.
Yeah, and he's literally replacing Clifton Moore because Clifton would have been a junior, and Joey Brunk will be a junior technically, junior as in 2 more years left of eligibility. So, literally replacing that. So, I echo exactly what you say, and we're going to get into all of the recent signings as of now because, of course, when we're recording this podcast, we're only 2 hours shy of Anthony Harris officially committing to UNC, but most people saw that he was saying that he was going to come, announcing the day of him finishing his recruitment at UNC, announcing that he's going to say his school of choice later this evening. It was kind of a foregone conclusion almost that Indiana fans knew that he was going to go to UNC. But anyway, 2 hours after, very fresh. Right now, a lot of people are upset, and a lot of people saying basically, Archie, what is Archie doing in anything? So first, I would like to remind people that, yes, Archie did get probably the biggest must-get player in terms of situation last week with Joey Brunk. Joey Brunk, obviously, as everyone's talked about, growing up as an Indiana fan, we needed center depth. He got him right away. So Archie is doing something. It's just there are so many people that were on IU's radar. If you had Harlan Beverly, Anthony Harris, Lester Quinones, Trendon Watford, Jalen Wyndham, even throwing people like maybe Keir Lewis, that's a lot of people, and you're going to swing and miss on some of those people. And who knows, we could swing and hit on everyone else, or we could swing and miss on everyone else. So just time will tell. Archie has a thought process. He's just as in the know as we are. Hearing this news now, he's probably going to go some different direction and talk to other people or recruit someone else harder, vice versa. So let's talk about the people that are left on Indiana's basically watch board, at least as of Tuesday evening, and from what we've heard from just general rumblings. So I think it's fair to say, would you agree that we would have, obviously, I think the number one choice for Indiana fans right now is Lester Quinones, and then Trendon Watford, and then Jalen Wyndham probably is starting to come up now that we missed out on Anthony Harris. Do you agree? Do you see any other people, or do you think that's kind of just the top as of Tuesday evening, April 23rd?
Yeah, Lester Quinones obviously is the top guy, just because he fills a guard spot that we need. I mean, as far as high priority targets, Trendon Watford, because he's a 5-star recruit, of course, and would, probably push us into top 25 discussion if we were to get him. So that would be a wonderful thing also, just because Trendon is a fantastic basketball player. But then, yeah, I think the person to look for, I think you mentioned him, Jalen Wyndham. We haven't offered him yet, I don't think. But I feel like with Anthony Harris out of the way, and with the guy that went to Miami out of the way, Harlan Beverly, I think we'll be looking at Jalen Wyndham probably getting an offer here soon. I'd be surprised if he did not. But
I'm a couple seconds away from checking to make sure. I was pretty sure that
I don't think we offer.
actually, I don't know. It says interests. I'm not sure.
Yeah, if it says interest, it means it's
offer. No, yes, correct.
No,
so he has not been offered officially.
Yeah.
So right now for Jalen Wyndham, basically Creighton is the number one choice for him at the moment. But just for an update, so Lester Quinones, he announced that he's going on Twitter himself. So this is not through any other media members. He said himself he's going to decide on May 10th. He is visiting tomorrow, April 24th. So many of you are going to listen the day he's starting his visit, April 24th to April 26th. So basically Wednesday through Friday of this current week. Right now on his list, his final 5 that he put down were Indiana, Michigan, LSU, Memphis, and Maryland. He cut off Florida, Georgia, and Ohio State. So we beat out Tom Crean for at least the final 5 for Lester. But he's got the Indiana visit, and then he almost goes straight to Michigan for a visit. So it is worth noting that he has a Michigan visit from April 29th to April 30th. But those were basically the big visits that he was putting down. Memphis is in the running pretty heavily. A lot of people think he's going to go to Memphis, so he's already done a lot there. But we'll talk about LSU in a second with the next person. But Trendon Watford, for more updates on him, well, not updates, just reminding you. So he was going to decide this past weekend, but due to probably multiple circumstances that he really didn't want to, there was talk about him not being able to announce it on live TV like that, versus also LSU, the head coach Will Wade being reinstated and being able to come back. LSU was on his list from most, at least pretty close to the beginning. LSU is on his list, so Will Wade coming back brings LSU back into the picture. So Trendon basically still has, right now, his final 4, Alabama, LSU, Indiana, and Memphis. Again, Memphis, another hard school that's recruiting him pretty much. It's like, man, Memphis right now is just the big bugaboo for the 2 recruits that Indiana would like at the moment. So,
but that's actually a good sign that we're fighting with Memphis, because Memphis is recruiting some of the best players in the country. Obviously, number 1 recruit in the class, James Wiseman, committed there. So if we're in a recruiting battle with Memphis, it means the player is obviously fantastic, because what Penny has been doing at Memphis has been fantastic, and his scouting has been excellent. So yeah, if we're fighting with Memphis, it means we're fighting over a very good player. So
yeah, and then Jalen Wyndham, of course, like we just said, he is from Ben Davis, and he's more of a lower-ranked recruit. He would be more of those project type of players. He's a shooting guard out of Ben Davis. I say that 6'5", 180 pounds. He would be more of your traditional quote unquote project players. He's a 3-star player as of right now, lower on the composite ranking. The offers that he was getting were Georgia State, IUPUI, Miami of Ohio, South Dakota, Toledo, Western Michigan, So more of basically the local, mostly the local non-Power 5 conference program. So really not those Power 5 conferences. We're not looking at him very in depth. So he would bring some depth. He would be more of a guy to come a little bit later. I haven't done too much scouting for particulars of how his game is yet, but if recruiting heats up, we can talk about him more in depthly later. But okay, of course, you and I not being media members, and also even if, not being big time media members, and even if we were, no one except for the players themselves know what they're going to do. But we're still going to get questions on like what percent chance are we going to have of getting all these people, and who are we going to get, and how close are we going to get to these kinds of people. So we have a lot of questions coming on Twitter this week. So just putting it out there, maybe talk a little bit about it too. But Mason on Twitter asked, what percent chance do we have to sign each of Leicester and Watford?
Each, like as in, well, I think we have a better chance of landing Trent in Watford than we do of landing Leicester, and that's only because Precious at oh my god, I'm gonna butcher his name, Achua or Achichu, whatever. Precious is a power forward prospect, just like Trent Watford is, and he's committing soon, and the rumblings is he's committing to Memphis. So that would be technically taking Trent Watford's spot. Now, Memphis could oversign, and so therefore Memphis could still be in the running for Trent Watford, but I don't see that like happening. I highly doubt that's going to happen. So that would then put Memphis out of the race, and it would be between LSU and us, which would make things a lot less complicated. Now, for Leicester Quinones, I think, Memphis needs a guard badly, and especially a good shooting guard, just like we do. And the rumblings are that he's also leaning towards Memphis. So I think we have a better chance of getting Trent Watford than we get Leicester Quinones. But I don't think our chances are great with either person. But if I had to pick somebody we had better chances with, it would be Trent Watford. But we're still on the outside looking in on both recruitments.
Which is interesting because I would have leaned the other way, saying maybe more a little bit of Leicester than Trendon, especially since maybe Leicester was also waiting to see if Anthony Harris was going to come, since it's not exactly the same position, but it's at least that guard type of position, even though it's not the same thing. Now Leicester knows exactly, even without Archie telling him, that he's going to be the top recruit for at least a guard coming in that Archie's going to be targeting within the next 2 to 3 weeks by the time he ends up deciding. So that could also go in favor of Indiana's way. But do you know exactly how many scholarship spots Memphis has open as of now before people like Precious or Leicester or Trendon commit? Or was it just a guess?
I think they have two.
Open.
They have two open, and they definitely need a guard, and they need a power forward. So one of the power forwards between Precious and Trendon is going there, and then they need a guard. So of course that's why I still think that it'd be tough for us. It's tough sledding for us with Leicester, because Memphis, like, even if they get Trent Watford to commit to Memphis, like, there's still a chance that Leicester can commit there as well. So it's ever evolving.
Yeah, because if they oversign, it's not the kid's fault that they oversigned; it's the coach's fault. So the coaches will have to clean up the mess, basically. But yeah, it'll be really interesting. And of course, this is, again, like we've said multiple times, fresh off of the Anthony Harris commit. So I'm pretty sure literally within the next few days, when you're listening to this podcast, you're going to hear something like maybe Archie will offer Jalen Wyndham officially, or offer different types of people, or hear that he's going to start to go after a different person and stuff like that. We haven't even started grad transfers and everything. Right. So,
and before we go into grad transfers, just understand that a lot of what we're talking about is speculation, as in the fact that we haven't really dipped our feet all the way in the grad transfer market yet. The Joey Brunk thing fell at our door. As far as Archie reaching out to transfers, that hasn't really been a thing so far. So we're basically kind of going off of well, this person played for this person in college, or this person was recruited by Archie Miller to go to Dayton. So there's a lot. That's a lot of what we're going to be talking about in a second. But anyways,
Yeah, and also you have to think. It seems like we're kind of running out of time, and in some ways we are running out of time because you are seeing people commit now, and the people that we needed or at least wanted to commit to IU are not, and it seems like we're running out of time. But you also have to remember, which we're going to talk a little about later, is the NBA draft, that a lot of people are eligible to go to the NBA draft and come back. So how is that going to change the landscape of recruiting? With just it doesn't, for Indiana, the NBA draft doesn't necessarily, unless Devontae changes things, the NBA draft doesn't directly relate to Indiana players, but it could, like with, oh, someone comes back and then someone transfers and then doing all of this different kind of stuff. So we'll see, basically, and we'll keep getting updated. You at least know when Lester is doing all of his visits to Indiana, then to Michigan, and then when he's going to decide. So there's a hard date for that. So basically just listening to how it went and listening to different media members get perspective from him and just quotes from him. And then Trendon actually, and Matt, you could talk about this maybe a little bit too. Trendon, remember, he said he was going to decide basically over the weekend, and now he delayed it. So really it could be at any point. And he told Rivals.com, this is a quote from him, it hasn't been set with an official date yet. This is in terms of his announcement. He told Rivals.com, but if I don't do it in like the next week, April 28th or April 30th, then I will probably do it the first week of May. So that is going into this weekend into next week. So within the next 10 days or so, Trendon says he's going to commit to some school. So things are going to happen pretty quickly within the next 2 weeks with Lester and Trendon, and we're going to have to see if Indiana gets him or doesn't get him.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you're going to have to check on day to day. Check the IU basketball, our IUBB hashtag on Twitter. I'm sure you'll be able to find out stuff pretty fast.
Follow Indiana HQ on Twitter. They're really good at getting that news out pretty quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's pause a second just to keep digesting things. And I'm going to talk a little bit about who won the week. And if you listen to the Hoosier Sound Offs, this week was a pretty positive Hoosier Sound Off. Again, if you don't listen to them, subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. It's about 3-minute update on just all of the IU sports stuff. So you can get it all instead of maybe reading an article. You can get it all, hear it for 3 minutes. There's a lot of updates the last week, just a lot of positive updates. But to pick from a couple of them, maybe the baseball team is continuing to do very well. You might have thought that they had a slow start, but again, remember, they have a new coach. So they're basically trying to come into their own, and they're starting to come into their own in a lot of respects. So they have moved up to first in the Big Ten. And again, by the time you listen to it, there's a chance that they might have not gotten knocked down just because of the amount of baseball games that are being played, but they kept moving up. They're doing really good in the Big Ten. And then also on the other side, the women's side for softball, Tara Traynor, pitcher for the softball team, was drafted in, without explaining it too much, basically drafted in the women's side of getting drafted for softball, since there's not a softball league as big as the MLB. But in simple terms, she was drafted for leagues going after college.
Right.
All right. We talked a little bit about the incoming recruits for high school, so class of 2019 recruits. Like you said, there hasn't been a lot of rumblings of grad transfer stuff, and we're going to hear more of that from Archie if he's going to decide to go more of the high school recruits or the grad transfers. So I know you've been looking up a little bit. What have you just thoughts in general about grad transfer?
I would love to see grad transfers come in. Hypothetically, we miss on both Trent and Watford, and we miss on Leicester, and then you go and look at Jalen Wyndham and go, I don't think he's going to be a good in 3 years, and I don't think he's going to be a decent backup in his freshman year. Like, we're not going to use him, and we'll probably redshirt him or whatnot. Like, we're not going to want to waste the scholarship spot on him. Not waste, but we're not going to want to use him because he's just not going to be a part of our future. So then you go to the transfer market, and 2 players that have been linked to Indiana and or should be linked to Indiana in the future if this hypothetical thing were to happen. You're looking at the likes of Justin Pierce, William & Mary grad transfer. He averaged 15 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists. He was a guard. He's heard from us, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, USC, Nevada, Ole Miss, Wisconsin, Butler, and a load of other schools. He's 6'7" and a shooting guard, so he's got size. I don't know how well he'll be able to defend at the Big Ten level. I also don't exactly know his 3-point percentage, but again, heard from us, so that's somebody to look at. Also looking at somebody who Archie recruited to Dayton. His name is Jordan Davis. He started 53 games in 2 seasons at Dayton. He averaged 9.8 points this last season, and then he was recruited by Archie to the Flyers. And another guy you should look for is Bryce Moore, who is by far the best defender, other than Rajon Tucker, who's another grad transfer who's probably going to be a star somewhere at one of the Big 5 programs like North Carolina or Duke. But he's a really good defender from Western Michigan. He averaged 9.8 points per game, and he was 40% from 3. So that is something that should, pop out the page at us. Also, he played for Indiana assistant Ed Schilling in high school. So I feel like that is a name that you guys should get very accustomed with in the upcoming weeks when it comes to grad transfers.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to talk a little bit about my personal opinion on grad transfer. They're not. Some of the grad transfers are probably not going to be maybe even as good of a player as.
Oh, my bad. I did not know that Bryce Moore transferred to Xavier. So Bryce Moore is off the table, by the way. So
there you
go.
Yeah,
my bad. I'm sure some of you were yelling at me. Hey, he transferred to Xavier. I'm sorry, I did not know that. I just checked to make
sure. Cut
it
pretty quick. But in terms of grad transfers, my personal opinion is that. Again, they're not going to be. Some of the grad transfers are not going to be as high of a caliber player as someone maybe like Trendon. Like Trendon's going to come in and going to be able to make an immediate impact. Some of the grad transfers we might potentially get or look at might not make that immediate impact, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Anyway, my point was that
Jordan Davis also transferred to Middle Tennessee State. Guys, I'm terrible. I'm sorry. He transferred like 20 days ago. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I guess I give up.
All right. But my point for grad transfers, I think at least if we have those 2 scholarship spots, and if we don't get Lester and Trendon, I think we should, or at least I would hope that we might get at least 1 grad transfer and a senior grad transfer, because we still want those scholarship spots open and available for the next 1 to 2 years for the next high school recruits, because everyone has talked about this year. Next year, the Indiana recruits are not going to be they're actually not very good at all compared to normal Indiana high school standards. But the class of 2021, lots and lots of really good players. Mm-hmm. Next year, there are a lot of great players outside of the state of Indiana. So we also don't want to handcuff ourselves next year where we've got like 1, maybe 2 spots open or something like that. So it would be nice because Joey, again, great pickup. But in terms of the scholarship spots available for next year, in terms of transfer, because when you think transfer, usually it's 1 year. Joey, we don't get the scholarship spot back from Joey, which is fine, but it's just a reality. So if we don't get Lester and Trendon, that might not necessarily be a bad thing, because we can get a 1 year grad transfer to come in, give us some more leeway next year. Because who knows, Archie's trying to find some other people that we can get to make some big splash stuff. But we kind of glossed over this a little bit. A lot of people are upset at the fact that why would Anthony Harris pick UNC? And Jed on Twitter had a question that basically summed all of this up. Why would any kid sign with the top program just so they can go sit on the bench? Anthony will get probably 32 minutes a game, if not more. And I think he's talking about Indiana, the 32 minutes a game. So who in the world is leading this kid to this decision? Well, but it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. And then he asked about what time the program started. But so basically just why would Anthony Harris commit to UNC, especially after earlier this morning, another point guard was committing to UNC, and you'll probably echo what I say and go into a little bit of detail, but UNC lost a lot of guard depth. Technically, Indiana has more guards, whether it's shooting, point guard, or some sort of combo guard. He could have seen maybe he's not going to start right away. And for some kids, whether that's you believe in that or not, they want to come into a program and start right at the very beginning, and they don't want to have to work too hard for some of their minutes. And also, he was originally going to Virginia Tech. And growing up in Fairfax, which actually his high school is literally 10 minutes down the road from where I live. Virginia Tech is actually still 4 hours away from Northern Virginia. So he was still going pretty far. So going to UNC was actually only adding an extra hour, but he grew up in ACC country, even when Maryland, before they were in the Big Ten, being in the ACC. So he literally grew up in ACC country. He could have also wanted to just stay with the conference that he was familiar with. Indiana still did a pretty good job trying to get him, and it would have been great to have him because he was the Archie Miller player, the Archie Miller point guard that would have just done great things under him. But he wanted to go to UNC. Roy Williams said something to him during his visit since he decided to commit literally right away. But your thoughts on Anthony Harris committing to UNC and not Indiana?
Yeah, I echo all your points. Also, there were some rumblings that he wanted to stay closer to home. Yes, 5 hours away, it seems like a lot, but where I come from, 5 hours away barely gets you out of the state. So
closer than it was. It's about 10-minute drive from where he lives. So, or 10-hour drive, 10-minute drive, 10-hour drive.
Yeah, 10-minute. I was like, no, but yes, 5 hours is relative. So, I mean, he stayed closer to home. Also, it's so hard to fight against UNC in recruitment for a player in the South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia area, because all the best players from those areas usually are recruited by the likes of Duke, UNC, or NC State, and that's their kind of big footprint there. And Virginia, by the way. I missed Virginia. But yeah, all those big schools recruit out of there. So it's very hard to win a recruitment battle with them. The fact that we were down to between us and UNC is big props to Archie Miller, especially with a kid that wanted to stay close to home. Yeah, it sucks that we haven't gotten the last two guards that we wanted. And I know some people were saying Anthony Harris is a lock. Nobody is a lock. Nobody's a lock to anywhere until they commit and they sign their paper and they sign their letter of intent. Until then, anything can happen. Look, he decommitted from Virginia Tech. Like his recruitment was on a bit of a whirlwind, and UNC didn't even jump into his recruitment. Virginia Tech before Virginia Tech, it was between us, Duke, and Virginia Tech. Then UNC jumps in, and it's hard to recruit against UNC, a team that has had more recent success than IU has had, and has shown it can develop guards. This last year with Romeo Langford not panning out as we thought he would have, and also hurting his draft stock, has been kind of detrimental to our guard recruiting. It's hard to go. We've probably been getting counter recruited by coaches being like, look what they did to Romeo Langford, right? And the recruit's not counting in the subtle details of, hey, Romeo had a broken hand the whole year, and this whole thing is he's been as great at everything else except for 3-point shooting, and that's because he had a broken hand. Like they're not considering that. They're just going, well, you're right. Look, he slipped from 7th in his class to what is he 19th in the most recent mock draft. So, I mean, It's just a lot of factors. We're going to get a guard. Don't worry about it. Archie will find somebody, whether it's a grad transfer or it's Lester. We're going to get somebody. I trust Archie. He hits more home runs than he misses. So
Yeah, and you talked about area, and this is the Northern Virginia is not necessarily 100% UNC area just because Maryland is here and people will dip in, but it's still it's still the East Coast compared to Indiana recruiting all the way over there. So it's kind of like Archie Miller trying to pull a guy from Illinois versus UNC trying to pull a guy from Illinois. It's just a little bit different if you flip flop it that way. And also, you talked about UNC again having stronger roots than Indiana in this type of area. The high school he went to, Paul VI, is one of those major national high schools that kids will go to play basketball. It's not as big as something like the IMG Academy, but it still brings in a lot of top recruits where the scouts will be there at those Paul VI high school games all the time. So, and it's not like and I mean that as in the lower level colleges will not come to the games. Those higher level colleges, Power 5, big schools will go to those games. So he also could have been, the UNC could have been talking to him for a while anyway, but there's a lot of reasons. Again, I wish he would have been able to go to IU, but I'm not surprised by his decision to go to UNC.
He would have been a great player in about 2 years. His junior year, he would have been probably the best defender in the Big Ten. That's from a guard position. Hopefully, he would have developed a much better outside shot, but he wouldn't have come in and been a starter like everybody says he would have because he didn't have the shooting. He's also a combo guard, which means he actually doesn't really know what position he wants to be. As funny as that sounds, right? You can put him at point guard, you can put him at the 2, you can kind of put him as a ball handling, secondary ball handler or whatnot. That's fine. But if you're coming in as a combo guard, that means he played a bunch of different positions, and he would have been great for depth, but he wouldn't have started. Somebody like Lester Quinones is coming in as a 2 guard. He knows his role. He's a shooter. He's an excellent shooter at that. And that's definitely something we need. He is the more important target than Anthony Harris was, as much as I would have loved to have Anthony Harris in Indiana uniform.
Oh yeah, man. I can't say how much I would have loved to see Anthony Harris go to Indiana because, like I said earlier, he is the Archie Miller guy. He runs an offense like Archie Miller likes it. His defense, it's defense first. He loves defense more than anything else, and he would have literally fit into the pack line perfectly. He would have loved learning it, even if it's not the defense he might have played normally anywhere else. But yeah, I agree. But such is life. We go on. We find the next player. And quickly before we get into, because there are a lot of good questions surrounding this a little more, let's take a brief detour and let's talk about draft. And I mean draft as in the NFL draft and the NBA draft, because this week is the NFL draft. So are there any Indiana players that are potentially going to be drafted on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday? The players that I will highlight, Jonathan Crawford, Dan Godslin, Brandon Knight got invited to the NFL Combine. So that's kind of the first step when you want to get drafted. They got invited. And with those specific players, Dan Godslin being a long snapper, as good as he could have been as a long snapper, he could have been one of the best long snappers. Long snappers typically don't get drafted in the draft almost at all. They will, but typically they don't get drafted. So the likelihood of him getting drafted anyway was pretty limited. So we'll have to wait and see if he gets picked up afterwards. Technically, you could see him at like 600 or like ranked 1,000th or something in big boards, but we'll see. Then Jonathan Crawford was the highest rated player on CBS prospect, the CBS prospect rankings at 338th. So this draft, there is only 254 picks total. That includes the compensatory picks. So Jonathan Crawford at 338, that's frankly not even close. So I think the likelihood of an Indiana player getting drafted this year is unlikely, which is sad. I think it'll start to change soon, but do you agree, disagree?
No, I don't think anybody will be drafted. I do think Dan Godsil will find a place on an NFL team, and he will be a pro. But other than him, like you said, Jonathan Crawford probably has a chance to make an NFL roster. But Yeah, I think it's those two, and everybody else is on the outside looking in, kind of.
Yeah, Jonathan Crawford, maybe some practice squads at the beginning of the summer. Might get cut later unless he does something else. Brandon Knight did have some good runnings. Wes Martin also had a good pro day, so you could see them on rosters at the beginning of the year, but being on the rosters in August and September might be a little far-fetched, sadly, which is sad.
Yeah.
Because it's something like the AAF going down, and then maybe you'll see them on the XFL just to keep getting their shot and try and get in the NFL. So, and that's what I mean. Hopefully, I really hope, and I think you agree, I really hope some of those development leagues that are trying to become development leagues end up working, because players like Indiana football players, you're not going to have a lot of them drafted like Ohio State. So those development leagues are going to be where players like IU players are going to go if they want to potentially get to the NFL. But all right, NBA, are you well versed in the specific details on hiring an agent going into the draft and coming back, or just basically that's how it's changed this year?
That is how it's changed this year. Yeah, that's about it. You can hire an agent and still come back. That's the new rule this year, which I think is smart. And I think you have until April 31st.
No, May 29th.
May 29th, sorry. April 31st. You have till May 29th to decide whether you're coming back or not. Of course, Romeo hasn't hired an agent yet, so that's interesting. But
I don't remember if it's April 31st or another date, but the April date was to declare for the draft. So if you could leave to declare for it.
Right. Okay. Perfect.
And then come back. So again, yeah, with all those rule changes, it's a little bit dicey with the next few years when some of those rule changes will come into place. But May 29th is when you'll get to see some of those people. So you'll see if Romeo ends up coming back or if Devontae ends up staying. You'll get to see that around the end of May, probably, because the combine is 10 days earlier than that. I think it's May 14th to 19th. So that's also something to look out for in the next couple of weeks. Who gets an NFL combine pick? So 60 total picks in the NBA draft. I think it's pretty safe to say that if Romeo stays, that he's going to get drafted. And it just depends on where. We're going to talk about that later, but more of, you might want to hear, does Juwan have a chance? CBS Sports Big Board as of now has Juwan ranked the 79th. But then I'll also caveat say it's kind of hard right now with the uncertainty of players going into the draft or not. Like, are some of the people that declared for the draft going to come back for another season?
Mm-hmm.
And also, who's going to get an NBA Combine invite? Who's going to show out during that? Is Juwan just going to play lights out? So I think it's hard to say. And then Devontae, probably nothing yet, right?
Right.
So, yeah. Anything else to add? But that's pretty much it, is at least as of now.
That's it. I find it very interesting that Romeo hasn't hired an agent. That's about it. And also, we need a guard back next year. That's about it.
Well, yeah, his dad's doing everything for him anyway, so.
I'm pretty sure,
Yeah. All right, let's get to our questions before we wrap up, and some pretty good questions. We'll start out with Rick on Twitter. Will Indiana get any more prospects? And then I'll preface all of these questions. We've touched on certain parts of them already in this episode, but anyway, Rick on Twitter, will Indiana get any more prospects? Let's say Green stays in the NBA draft, either a second-round pick or going to play overseas. What then? So basically his scenario is Romeo staying as well. That's three scholarship spots open. And I think they're going to get as many players as they can, whether it's Lester, Trendon, Jalen, any other high school recruits, any other grad transfers. But I also wouldn't be surprised if at that point he holds a scholarship spot and we play with 11 or maybe 11, if not 12 scholarship players. What do you think?
I think the same thing. Yeah, we'll definitely get a grad transfer or something like that at that point. But yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then Hoosier TA on Twitter, say we missed on Lester and Watford, which I think we will. Is grad transfer all we have left? And we talked about Jalen Wyndham, but is the grad transfer basically all we have left, or is there potentially someone else?
Jalen Wyndham, I think he would obviously then probably get a scholarship. And then, yeah, I mean, we got to get it. We're gonna get one more grad transfer. I'd be surprised if we didn't. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this question, James on Twitter: Did anyone see these struggles in recruiting? I sure didn't, and why? I touched on this earlier, and you can say your 2 cents in a second, but I don't think we're necessarily struggling. Like I said, we got Joey Brunk last week. I would have been concerned if we didn't get Joey Brunk coming to Indiana. I would have been concerned if we didn't get even someone like Trace Jackson Davis to come to Indiana. Archie's doing all the right things for what he can in his first 2.5 to 3 years. You also have to remember a lot of these players. I'll use Keon Brooks as an example. Keon was recruited basically by Michigan State and Kentucky for the most part hard for a majority of his final years as a high school player. Obviously, Michigan State and Kentucky have not changed coaches in a fairly long time. So Archie coming in very late for many of these recruitments, it really does matter because those relationships matter. If you listen to Trendon, he's mentioned how his number one thing is trust in a program and trust in a coach. That really means something to these players. So I don't think that they're necessarily struggling. I think we're a little more keen to it now that we have a new coach. So we're just a little more hyper aware of everything Archie is doing because it's a new face, it's a new coach. Everyone does that for every new coach. So I don't necessarily think they're getting it done. Obviously, he's not getting like an A+++ in recruiting, because if he was, he'd get anyone and everyone he'd offer. But it's just recruiting. You're going to hit some. You're going to get some. You're going to lose some. It's just kind of how it works.
I'm not saying the people that get everybody they want are cheating, but I'm saying that everybody who gets what they want are cheating. That's all I'm saying. So, I mean, you're dealing with 18-year-old kids that grow up only watching the NBA. Like, I don't think you understand as a college basketball enthusiast, as somebody who has a podcast about college basketball. I watch a lot of college basketball. But I know some of my friends back home who are my age that love basketball just as much as me, watch 0 to maybe only the March Madness tournament. That is it. And guess what, guys? We haven't been in March Madness in 3 years. So they haven't even seen us play. So, look, it sucks that we haven't gotten our guys, but it's a lot easier to recruit when you win. And it's a lot easier to recruit when you win and you win on a national stage. Now, IU needs to get back to winning and then getting back on the national stage. And then we'll start seeing recruits come in wanting to come to us and be like, are you going to give me a scholarship offer? Instead of us giving them a scholarship and be like, I'll consider it, right? So once Archie turns this around, which I absolutely believe he will, and I'm sure Noah believes the same thing, in the next couple of years, you'll start to see recruiting go to, which one of these guys do we want, and not of which one of these guys are we going to get. And so it'll change a little bit.
Yeah, and you actually see some people now that want to come to Indiana. It's just on a smaller scale. We'll just try and get those recruits to more 5-star recruits. And again, Archie's got 2 5-star all McDonald's All-American players in each of his 2 years of recruiting. So he's at least doing something right. Maybe it's not 100% right, but he's doing something right. So also your NBA point. This is the era of them growing up watching LeBron and Kobe, and now the Golden State Warriors with Steph. So it's pretty compelling why you want to play in the NBA at the moment.
Yeah. So look, NBA is fantastic. I love it. But, with Oladipo playing well in the NBA, that's actually really good for IU. And hopefully Romeo gets to go on and have a better career. And then recruits can go to be like, look, Indiana develops players. But that's the same thing with Keon Brooks. His dad talked about development. Who develops 5 stars better than Kentucky? Almost nobody. Kentucky is like an NBA development factory. You look at all the players they have that are superstars there, and you might go, well, they were all 5-star recruits when they went there. That's true. But they also stayed in the NBA draft and were number 1 picks. You look at what Archie did with Romeo this year. Not the greatest look right now, but I am sure Archie will turn it around and get it back to what it's supposed to be. And Indiana will be, a recruiting hotspot again, especially in the Midwest, and especially with Tom Izzo getting older and a bunch of other programs in flux. So,
yeah, and then you might also say, Well, Kentucky isn't winning on the grand scale. They're not getting to Final Fours. They're not winning national championships. And you're 100% correct. But some of these kids don't necessarily want to go in to win a national championship. They just want to be able to develop, like Matt said, to get to the NBA and start playing in the NBA. If they get to the national championship game, great. If they don't, great. Anyway, our last Twitter question, Bruce on Twitter. Art's not getting it done. We just mentioned that. But he said, who do you consider a must-have at the guard position? And I think as of now, Tuesday evening, April 23rd, before we see who Archie's going after, I think the obvious answer is Lester, just because we're not really going after any guards as of this moment. But I think that's going to change even at the end of this week.
By the way, I'd be extremely surprised if this is going back to a previous question we had, but I'd be extremely surprised if Devontae Green doesn't come back because he's still going to classes, and that means he's expecting to come back next year. If the recruit, or let's say the player leaves and declares for the draft and then stops going to classes, that means a lot more than somebody who it goes to class and also declares for the draft at the same time. So.
I saw someone on Twitter say, instead of hearing if they hired an agent or not for if they go to the NBA, can we know if they're attending classes on campus or not?
Right.
And I'll be like,
that means a whole lot more than whether they hired an agent or not. But
yeah. Must have at the guard position before we wrap up. Lester or anyone else?
Lester.
Yeah,
I think that's
almost the only answer at this point before it changes.
It is the only answer at this point.
Yeah, at this point. So that about wraps it up for our 85th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. I will be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. As always, big shout out, big thanks to our live audience for coming out and participating in that chat below. Make sure to stay tuned through updates on Twitter. Visit our website, indianahq.com. Subscribe so you can get all of those episodes right to your phone. Send us your questions as the audience. You can get them on. We can get them on our next episode. Again, this podcast, we had a lot of great questions, and they come from you. They give us great content. Most importantly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. Tell a friend, share our links. Your support is how we grow this podcast so we can reach more of those more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.